The 17-year-old Kang Cheol was an Olympic gold medalist in shooting. When I was 17, I still watched Doraemon while eating. Kang Cheol blew the bullet for the last decisive shot. The other players finished their last shot with an unimaginably high result. It was a big pressure for him. He had to get an absolute score to win the game. Could he keep calm? Would luck find him? Well, everyone held their breath when he fired the last shot. They hailed when Kang Cheol won spectacularly. Everyone, especially Kang Cheol, was over the moon. He celebrated his victory with his father, yet he lost his victory after just one night due to an unknown man's so-called black. He came as slight as a wind and murdered Kang Cheol's family. The culprit used the gun that Kang Cheol used during the Olympic and left it at the crime scene. People really cared about his case because he had a conflict with his father about which university to go to. They believed that was why Kang Cheol murdered his family. A national son-in-law was turned into a murder after just one night. It was the strength of the netizen. After gathering all the evidences and motive, the prosecutor had no reason to let him go. Unfortunately, the prosecutor in charge was Han Cheol-ho, who wanted to go into politics. He wanted to put Kang Cheol in jail to confirm his reputation. At the first hearing, he proposed the highest convict to Kang Cheol. As Kang Cheol was an idol, prosecutor Han wanted to punish him as an example to the youth. Kang Cheol expressed his anger due to the humiliation of the civil council. He claimed that he was innocent and that was such a nonsense accusation. Yeonju woke up and saw a dozen of missed calls from the professor. She hurriedly ran to see him with a clumsy look and be ready to hear his scolds. As she was daughter of the author, he asked her to give him the next chapter of the webtoon named W, which was very famous recently, and the lead character was Kang Cheol. That was why his life was always full of unknowns. To make the professor happy, she asked her father about the next chapter of his webtoon. However, he disappeared in a very strange way. He even wanted to take the life of Kang Cheol. The character he made, he wanted to end his series sooner than expected. Kang Cheol wasn't simple a webtoon character. He became a real human being who strove for his life and freedom. That was how he could drag Yeonju into the webtoon when he had his own feelings. Before she got what just happened, she was panicked when seeing a young man dying of pleural effusion. As she was a doctor, she decided to save his life in the decisive moment. Next, she realized that he was exactly the same as the character in her father's webtoon. In other words, she was pulled into W's alternate universe by his strong will to continue his life. At that time, she saw the words, "To be continued." In the blink of an eye, she returned to her father's office. Somehow, what she did earlier was drawn in the next chapter sent to the publisher. It wasn't a dream at all. It was really her, and what she did were brought into the webtoon. After all these years, Kang Cheol became a co-CEO and a billionaire with a fortune of 800 billion won. However, people looked down on him because he was released after a year of detention thanks to lack of evidences. Kang Cheol was very lonely in this life, but his strong will prompted him to find the real culprit who murdered his family. After being saved by Yeonju, he recovered significantly. However, he couldn't find who she was. He was actually finding for a girl who didn't exist in his world. Kang Cheol believed that she was the answer to his miserable life. He had no idea that everything he said in Yeonju's card visit was vividly drawn in the next chapter, no matter how hard she tried to explain to her father's student. He couldn't get what she meant. Looking at the young man in the webtoon, Yeonju got worried. She wondered why Kang Cheol was finding for her and when he would stop. Finally, her father, author Songmu, went home after a few days. He told her that it was him who drew everything, and he didn't tell her exactly where he went when she asked. Yeonju left because she didn't want to make it weirder. She called Subong to ask him about the next chapter. He told her that Songmu intended to end Kang Cheol's life again. Yeonju questioned her father, though she was about to ignore. She wondered why he wanted to end the life of Kang Cheol again after 2 chapters. In the tense moment, Songmu blamed her for saving Kang Cheol. He soon knew that Kang Cheol with his own sense was out of his control. When he denied, Yeonju asked him how he could draw exactly what she wore that day. She herself could feel that Kang Cheol was a living individual, who had a heart and feelings. He was wandering from the subject. She tried to stop Songmu as he would become a murderer if he ended Kang Cheol's life. Right at that time, she was pulled into the webtoon again, knowing Kang Cheol was in danger. Yeonju went Han-kook Hospital where he was having a treatment. Coincidentally, it was right opposite of her and built exactly like the hospital she was working at in the reality. That was how she could easily find his room and stop the nurse from giving him an injection of poison. In the real world, Songmu saw what happening in the W's alternate universe on the screen. Kang Cheol realized his life savior. Though he raised many doubts of her, he smiled when she looked so puzzled when trying to explain it to him. At that time, so he came. She was his friend since they were in high school. She said Yeonju looked much more beautiful than the sketch and it was the reason why it was so hard to find her. Yeonju remembered that Kang Cheol said she wasn't beautiful at all. She begged him to help her get out of there or else it would be a trouble once the police came. Kang Cheol said she was an illegal immigrant. His intuition told him that she was honest when she said she wasn't the accomplice. He was so curious about the girl who knew him well. They promised to see each other again when he was discharged from hospital. At that time, she would explain everything to him. In order to keep in touch, he gave her a phone as his intuition told him to trust her. Before she left, he ate his words that she wasn't beautiful, then praised her as a true beauty. Yet, Yeonju knew he wasn't sincere to compliment women like that. After Kang Cheol's bodyguards took her out of the hospital, she didn't know to get out of there like the first time she was pulled there. She could only end it when she returned to the real world. Suddenly, it was 2 months later in the W's alternate universe. At that time, Kang Cheol appeared and took her to a restaurant in a luxury car. She realized that the time there evolved around Kang Cheol. When nothing happened, the time would jump to the plot. That was why it was only 30 minutes to Yeonju while it was 2 months past in the webtoon. The weather was hot, yet, Yeonju was still in a winter outfit. He remembered she wore the same outfit 2 months ago, so he took her to go shopping. The female staff there admired and envied of their appearance. At that time, Yeonju was wondering what to do with Kang Cheol to get out of here. For no reason, she slapped him, but it still wasn't the end of the chapter. Her slap embarrassed Kang Cheol. When he asked her why she acted like that, she came up with an extremely bold idea. Indeed, it was to be continued. Taking the chance, Yeonju returned to her world. Once again, she disappeared in a vague way right in front of his eyes. As soon as returning to her world, Yeonju told her father that she met Kang Cheol twice. He angrily said Kang Cheol became a monster trying to manipulate him. That was why he gave himself the right to take Kang Cheol's life. Regardless of her prevention, her father went to a motel to draw the death of Kang Cheol. However, the time in the W's alternate universe stopped. Thanks to this, Kang Cheol could avoid the big truck rushing towards him. Song-moo saw the sketch of the accident deleted itself on the screen. He was shocked when Kang Cheol's life was going on, which was totally out of his plot. When Yeonju arrived at her father's office, Subong said he left with his laptop. He realized that her dress was exactly the same as the webtoon. The thing was that she couldn't afford that high-end dress and heels. That meant what she told him earlier was true. Kang Cheol was really a human being, not a webtoon character created by her father. To find out the reason why her father wanted to end Kang Cheol's life, Yeonju read all the former sketches. In 2009, when Yeonju's parents had a divorce, she moved out with her mother, being in anguish after his wife and daughter moved out. He had no inspiration for continue his webtoon. That was why he decided to end Kang Cheol's life. From this moment on, Kang Cheol's will to continue his life was very strong. He was not resigned to his fate. This accidentally brought a new beginning for Song-moo's idea. Thanks to the help of Song-moo, Kang Cheol became a co-CEO of a company and a billionaire. Then he found his father's friend and offered to buy the TV station. He paid for the best team to produce a case study program, which helped him track the culprit who murdered his whole family. The program named W Movies, the webtoon with Kang Cheol as a lead character brought Song-moo a big fame. Lots of Korean people loved it for the unique and creative plot. Little by little, he realized that Kang Cheol no longer wanted to live that Song-moo created. Kang Cheol wanted to live his life. Song-moo always scared that Kang Cheol one day would come to the real world and swallow him up. That was why he left a note behind the photo, swallow the monster before being swallowed by it. In the hospital, Yeonju tried not to let anyone realize she was the one who kissed Kang Cheol. She received a phone call from Subong when she was at the bus station. Subong asked if she changed the lead character's feelings to get out of there. He was sure that there was a way for only Yeonju to be pulled into the webtoon. However, she was too exhausted to faint away. At that time, she traveled to the W's alternate universe once again. Meanwhile, so he was talking to the store manager, who told her everything that happened between Yeonju and Kang Cheol. It was suspicious that only Kang Cheol came out of the fitting room, and the girl who kissed him disappeared in such a strange way. Thus, so he wanted to see if there was another exit. As soon as she opened the door of the fitting room, Yeonju was lying on the floor motionlessly. The store manager was so scared. After Kang Cheol heard about it, he came and carried Yeonju to the hotel. Perhaps he really believed that she didn't belong to his world, so that he didn't take her to the hospital to avoid troubles. Avoiding one problem but getting hit with another. Some officers came to the hotel to tell Kang Cheol that they failed to find the witness named Yeonju. They didn't know he was carrying the witness they were trying to find. After avoiding the attention of the police, he put her on bed and admiring the key of his life. when she was half awakened, she told everything she knew about him, including the reason why he chose to stay on top of a building and illegally keep a gun under his pillow. Yeonju knew it all. He had more and more questions about her. She knew how sad he was during his dark time and how lonely he was in this world. When Kang Cheol opened the door, Black pointed a gun at him. With a quick reaction, he pushed Black away from Yeonju's bed. As the door was close and she was safe, Kang Cheol began to fight with Black, and right at the moment Black got into the elevator. Kang Cheol thought he could catch Black this time, yet, Black disappeared to the air. In the real world, Songmu went crazy when Kang Cheol could save his own life. He smashed his computer and ran away with fear. Kang Cheol was so sure that wasn't a dream when he found the gun Black left at the scene. As soon as Yeonju woke up next morning, Doyoon told her that she would have lunch with Kang Cheol. Everything consisting of clothes was available in the bathroom. Well, the sexy style was not her liking. Suddenly, she came up with an idea to get back to her world by taking the gun that Kang Cheol always kept under his pillow. She wondered how to end this chapter in the most reasonable way, by gun or sexy lingerie. At that time, Kang Cheol and Doyoon went to the room. They saw her acting crazy. Shame on her, she needed to dig a hole to hide herself. Out of choice, she put a gun at him. She asked him not to get close to her without knowing that it was an empty gun. Turning the table, Kang Cheol got back the gun and threatened her. She said she kissed him to get a chance to leave. He couldn't buy into such a ridiculous reason, because she was still there after all. She said she could disappear when he changed his emotion. Because he was the main character, he seemed to realize something. Kang Cheol frostily pulled the trigger. The bullet went through her body but she didn't get hurt at all. Yeonju herself frightened out and blacked out. When she woke up again, Kang Cheol asked her tons of questions. He probably knew that her existence in this world was imprescriptible, because she didn't belong there, knowing that her moving would be based on his emotions. He was very pleased and asked her to stay until she told him the whole truth. As he was going on a business trip, Yeonju knew her father wouldn't stop, so she warned him about the danger. The moment he looked at her and smiled, Yeonju got why she was pulled into the webtoon, because Kang Cheol said she was the key to his life. This accidentally turned Yeonju into the female lead instead of Sohee. Kang Cheol went to the pier to meet son Hyo-suk. He was searching for the truck tractor that dashed at him the other day, but he found no clue at all. Kang Cheol wasn't surprised, recalling everything happened to him. He felt like his life was like a staged play. The nurse who wanted to take his life had no motive for her action, and when Kang Cheol went to the rooftop alone to see Black without his bodyguards, it was like he was digging a hole for himself. Since Kang Cheol met Yeonju, he thought the one they had been finding for might be in another universe. He wanted to learn more about the mysterious man in black. Yeonju was so-called a key to every single layer of doors leading to the truth. At the same time, Yeonju was very busy. The high-end items Kang Cheol bought for her covered the path. People thought she was his fiancée owing to his special treatment for her. Though she acted cold to him, her heart wanted to blow up as soon as she heard his warm voice. She liked it, but she didn't express it, wittingly or unwittingly. He stupidly told her that she was very sexy. Yeonju was speechless, yet, she tried to tell him that she loved him as a surprise. It made herself shy instead of the listener. After that, Sohee asked Yeonju to grab a drink together upstairs, at the entrance of the pub. Sohee asked Yeonju to get inside with her bodyguards as she had to make a video call. When Yeonju sat down for just a few minutes, Sohee made an excuse to order her bodyguards to return to Kang Cheol's penthouse. As a result, the waiter realized Yeonju, who saved Kang Cheol on the rooftop. The police was searching for her for a long time. If she was caught, she would get into trouble. As her identity was invalid in this world, she had no choice but to run away. In such a critical situation, Yeonju called Kang Cheol for help. While his bodyguards were on the way to pick her up, the officers were closely after her. Therefore, Yeonju threw the phone, which Kang Cheol gave her. To the bodyguard, she let the police handcuff her. The news spread fast and wide, attracting people's attention. All of them thought Yeonju was the one suspect. She could not provide any information, so that the officer felt helpless and angry. When Yeonju couldn't give her alibi nor identity, she was convicted of inciting to harm Kang Cheol. As a result, she was detained for the investigation. Her inmates in the cell didn't look friendly. As soon as Kang Cheol arrived at the airport, the reporters surrounded him. They asked him about the false rumor related to Yeonju having a glib tongue and media influence. He could answer all those tough questions. Getting the car, Yeonju drove straight to the prison to visit Yeonju. On the way, so he called to tell him that Doyoon came up with the plan. Kang Cheol got mad at her for what she did to Yeonju. He blamed her for not acknowledging Yeonju's action. What she did was to protect Kang Cheol. Do not judge a book by its cover. Kang Cheol developed his company and didn't let everyone stuck in a rut. However, she was doing the opposite, the prerequisite set by Kang Cheol. Therefore, she deserved to be suspended. Seeing Yeonju at the prison, he asked her if she felt tired, though she tried not to shed tears. It was so hard for a girl like Yeonju. At the current situation, Yeonju had to appear in court many times due to the accusations. The police officers were tired of searching for 2 months. Once they caught her, they considered her the culprit. Only when she gave Kang Cheol the answers that she could be taken out of there. Yeonju knew him better than anyone else in this university. She was in 2 minds. It might hurt and make him regret. However, it was the only way to help her out of this situation. Under the encouragement of Kang Cheol, she let him know that the world he was living was just a webtoon in her world. Indeed, it was so shocking to Kang Cheol. At the same time, Yeonjun returned to her own world. Subong came in time and helped her buy new clothes. The other day when he called Yeonju, a young woman picked her phone up at the bus station. When he came to take Yeonju's belongings, Sunmi called him about the strange plot. Subong knew that Yeonju was in jail, so she told Kang Cheol everything. Yeonjun went home, feeling weary in body and mind. She was cross-examined by the prosecutor for a whole week. Subong believed that once the webtoon ended, Yeonju wouldn't be pulled into the W's alternate universe again. At the same time, in the W's alternate universe, Kang Cheol was dissatisfied with a nonsense yet reasonable answer of Yeonju, which could explain all the tragedies of his life. When Kang Cheol knew his world was just an alternate universe, the time stopped again. When Subong was going to write a cliffhanger, he was extremely panicked when he couldn't use the display tablet. Once Kang Cheol knew the truth about his world, the alternate universe was going to break down as a punishment for the one who learned all about the truth. Yeonju realized that she was the reason why Kang Cheol was experiencing such a misfortune. Kang Cheol in an unreal world saw a magic door for the first time at the moment of despair. Touching the door, he remembered when he got stabbed on the rooftop. The door appeared, which was also the first time he pulled her to his world. He knew it was her world behind the door. Thus, he passed through it to find the truth about his life. That was the first time he saw his portrait on the bus banner and the cover of many comic books. How did he feel when he knew his life was just a half-done webtoon created by someone? He came to a bookstore and read the comics about his life. Formerly he always felt that everything was just a vague answer. At this point in time, the truth was barely exposed, which hurt him a lot. After escaping from the alternate universe, Yeonjun kept grieving over Kang Cheol. Subong told her that the display tablet was under repair. However, he was too afraid to stay in Songmu's house, so that he would get back to his home until the display tablet was fixed. When Yeonju was going to assist Professor Park during an operation, Sukbium asked her if she was engaged. There was a tall, white man who came to the hospital and claimed himself her fiancé. The thing was that Yeonju didn't have a boyfriend yet. How could she have a fiancé? Sensing something, Yeonju went to the lobby and got shocked when seeing Kang Cheol there. Kang Cheol took Yeonju to the rooftop for a deep talk. At that time, he admitted that she was right when she said he would feel unhappy once he knew the truth. He understood that she kept silent to protect him, as she knew everything about him. He thought she was a big fan of the webtoon. When he said goodbye to her, she didn't have the heart to let him tramp the streets. Even though she wasn't rich, she was confident enough to be his guardian, and she told him to wait for her until she finished the operation. After that, she rushed to the operation room to do her job. Kang Cheol didn't listen to her. He went to the house of the author, Songmu a.k.a. Yeonju's father. What comes around comes around. He figured out that Yeonju was the author's daughter. That was why she knew he was in danger and appeared at that time. Professor Park was scolding Yeonju for distracting to work. The main reason was that the lead character was busy with a girl instead of trying to revenge. The thing was that Kang Cheol had feelings for a girl also named Yeonju, not Sohee. Yeonju said Kang Cheol had no reason to fall for Sohee, and the one he liked was actually her. Speaking of it, she felt a little bit embarrassed, so she tried to pull herself together. Professor Park exclaimed that she was acting like his secondary school daughter who was also a big fan of W. They shall meet each other and exchange their delusion. Yeonju didn't see Kang Cheol there when Professor Park let her go. Failing to find Kang Cheol, she called her dad and he didn't pick up the phone. When Songmu went back home, he turned on his phone and saw her message. When he was calling her back, Kang Cheol appeared from the dark. He scared Songmu to drop his glass of wine. Picking up the phone, Yeonju was stupefied when hearing Kang Cheol's voice. Kang Cheol just wanted to talk, yet Songmu intended to stab him, so he gotta put up resistance hearing their talk. Yeonju was really anxious for her father. Kang Cheol didn't intend to harm Songmu. It was thanks to Yeonju who saved him all the time. Immediately, Yeonju contacted Subong, who was in an internet cafe. He dropped his noodles and immediately turned back to Songmu's home to keep Kang Cheol there until she came. Try to calm down. Kang Cheol saw Songmu bleeding due to their fight earlier. He thought it was fair for him, speaking of all the pains he had to suffer. Meanwhile, Songmu could be immortal in the alternate universe. He also reminded him of what happened. After Black stabbed him, he pulled Songmu into the alternate universe. Kang Cheol asked for help, yet Songmu looked at him frostily. He even tried his best to stop Songmu from ending his life. At that time, Yeonju appeared and saved him. He remembered everything, but he kept silence because there was no evidence. His intuition told him that the old man wanted to take his life all the time. He believed that Songmu no longer needed him once he got everything, fame and wealth. Songmu created Kang Cheol to avoid the truth that he was an useless old alcoholic. He created a perfect Kang Cheol in opposition to him. In the end, he still couldn't hold his wife and daughter back. Songmu wanted to end everything. Lacking of courage, he used Kang Cheol as a replacement. That gave Kang Cheol an obsession of Han River. As for Kang Cheol, his life ended in the river before Songmu decided to get him out of danger. Songmu explained that Kang Cheol's strong will begged him for help. At that time, Songmu really loved the character that he created. Soon later, he realized that Kang Cheol became a monster. Songmu was extremely stressful when Kang Cheol kept finding the one who created him. Though he wanted to flee away many times, he cared more about Yeonju and wanted to give her a carefree life, so that he tried to continue this well-loved webtoon. When they both calmed down, Kang Cheol wanted Songmu to continue the webtoon. That was the only way to save his friends in the alternate universe. Songmu admitted that the plot was going the way Kang Cheol wanted. For so long, he couldn't control the ending. Kang Cheol wanted to find the murderer and continue living a high-class life. At this time, the truth was revealed that the culprit who murdered his entire family was just an added detail to boost Kang Cheol's will. Songmu didn't give the murderer an identity. After all those years suffering from an anguish of body and mind, finding the culprit was Kang Cheol's only motive for life, but it was no hope. He flied into a flame of anger. Songmu believed that Kang Cheol was too virtuous to take his life. However, it came a sound of a shot. Yeonju heard on the phone that Songmu was shot. Before leaving, Kang Cheol told Subong to call an ambulance for Songmu. Yeonju saw her father dying when she arrived. The doctors were trying to save his life. He was taken to a hospital emergency department. The head of department checked on his wound and couldn't stand this shock. Yeonju got out of the emergency room when the operation started. Subong told Yeonju that he saw Kang Cheol shot her father and got out of there without leaving a trace. Yeonju regretted to rescue Kang Cheol, who the bullet was taken out of Songmu's body and his life was saved. At the same time, Kang Cheol left a letter to Yeonju at the hospital and left. Next morning, the TV news reported that the author Songmu was shot. Yeonju was taking care of her dad. She recalled his warning of Kang Cheol's danger. She really felt sorry for him after what happened. While later, the editor-in-chief called Yeonju and told her that someone sent the new chapter of W to him this morning. It was someone else, not her father, who sent it to him. Yeonju asked him to let her browse it. The new chapter was all about what happened the previous day. Kang Cheol shot the author. He threw the gun into a heap of garbage and pondered about what he did. Next, he went to a convenience store to write a letter to Yeonju. A coworker gave Yeonju a letter which was written by Kang Cheol. He wrote the ending for his life. Kang Cheol made himself the murderer. He jumped into the river, like the way Songmu wanted to end his life. Yeonju went to the bridge to find him. However, she found no trace of him. Songmu woke up. The police said the culprit wasn't caught in any camera. The gun and the bullet disappeared in an unbelievable way that they couldn't explain. Subong and Yeonju visited Songmu. Subong told Songmu that Kang Cheol jumped into the river as the way the author wanted. They needed to give the same testimony to cover it up. In the next day, Songmu was reported to try to commit a suicide because he felt so stressful at work and drank for a long time. The ending of the webtoon shocked its readers. Many of them was angry with such a nonsense ending. They begged the author to rebirth the lead character and continue the series. The editor-in-chief met Yeonju. He wanted her to advise her father to continue the webtoon with just a few more chapters. However, Yeonju refused. She wanted her father to retire after a long time suffering from stress. The editor was so sad. Yeonju wouldn't change her mind. She stood up and left. Yeonju moved in with her father. She wanted him to relax without worrying about his work. Subong told her that the police found a body from Han River, which might be Kang Cheol. Both of them went to the mortuary to confirm it. However, Yeonju could tell that the body wasn't Kang Cheol. At night, Yeonju told her father about the body. she wondered if he was still alive and returned to the W's alternate universe. That might be the ending. Song-moo said the police collected all the evidences and returned him the computer. Song-moo decided to rebirth Kang Cheol. He knew Kang Cheol better than anyone else. Kang Cheol didn't take an aim at him when he pulled the trigger, there was something at the back of it, so he needed to repay Kang Cheol. Somehow, Song-moo couldn't continue the webtoon. That was why he decided to end the series. He didn't want to put Yeonju in danger when she was pulled into the alternate universe again and again. The best way for them all was to put it to an end, to forget about this. Song-moo would travel to London with his friends. Park Min-soo asked Yeonju out for lunch, as she was no longer a spring chicken anymore. He helped her had a blind date with a guy. However, that guy wasn't good looking at all. Yeonju didn't know what to do with this. Getting shy of it, she excused herself to the toilet and called her coworker to complain. All of a sudden, Yeonju was drowned in water. She freaked out when she saw Kang Cheol was there. She tried but failed to save him. In a blink of an eye, she was back to reality with a fully wet body. She reviewed the ending of the webtoon. It continued with a plot twist. Yeonju went to find Subong. She told him what happened and asked him to continue the webtoon and save Kang Cheol. Time was stopping in the alternate universe. People left many comments when the series continued. They were waiting for the next part of the story. Yeonju and Subong knew there was something which made Kang Cheol want to take back his life, but they didn't know the reason why. At the same time, on the bridge over Han River, Black was standing there. He looked so dangerous. After setting up the display tablet, Yeonju and Subong discussed to continue the story in a reasonable way to save Kang Cheol. Subong didn't dare to mess with Song-moo's work. Yeonju sincerely persuaded him to keep it on. It was so hard to make the twist sound cohesive. Subong remembered a very important detail. Song-moo developed the webtoon based on Yeonju's idea when she was a teenager. Back then when she was watching Olympic shooting, Yeonju came up with an idea. She sketched a character as a shooting athlete. That was a handsome and talented shooter named Kang Cheol, a fictional character created by Yeonju. She wished to see him one day. Yeonju was struggling to continue the story, as she didn't know how to draw. Subong advised her to wait for the return of Song-moo, yet, Yeonju was determined to do it by herself. Busied herself for a while, she finally came up with an idea. She brought herself back to the prison. Soon after Kang Cheol's jump, the divers came and rescued him. He was taken back home and safe. Kang Cheol felt really confused when he woke up, so he wondered why he was found in Han River. Doyoon told Kang Cheol that Yeonju was caught. That worried Kang Cheol a lot. He drove to the prison to see her. When he knew she was taken to the police station, Kang Cheol stopped the police bus. He used his power to ask the officer to let him see her. The officers listened to him. Yeonju said she was making a way to save him from death, which moved him a lot. Yeonju saved him 3 times. She advised him to find a new goal for life instead of revenge and suicide. Also, she wanted him to get her out of jail in a legal way, making requital to Yeonju for her help. She also promised to let Kang Cheol know what his motive for life was after she was taken out of jail. They both would write a new plot for life. Kang Cheol promised to do it for her. At the police station, Yeonju got scolded by a police officer. At that moment, Kang Cheol asked to talk privately to Yeonju without being recorded. He blamed her for giving herself the right to control his life in the way she wanted. Kang Cheol thought she was playing a prank on him. He thought she was kidding with his life and required her to stop it. Because he wanted to decide his own life, Yeonju was shocked by that. He wondered why she stayed there for the one who lost his family like him. She should have returned to her family and go on her life. Kang Cheol was so surprised when she said she loved him. They silently looked at each other. End of the chapter. Yeonju returned to her world. Recalling the time together, they both shed tears. When Kang Cheol was about to leave the police station, Yeonju came back because she wanted to continue the story. What he said didn't change her mind. Unexpectedly, Kang Cheol gave her a kiss. Seeing, the officer walked out and let them alone. From then on, Yeonju began to write her own life story in the W's alternate universe, even though her mother was waiting for her and the hospital lacked a doctor. She happily accepted it and accepted to stay. After that, Doyoon and a lawyer conveyed Kang Cheol's message to her. He wanted her to choose a style for their next date: Cinderella, romantic and elegant, or bold. Yeonju was startled. As curious as she was, she decided to choose a bold style. To get her out of jail in a legal way, the lawyer showed the certificate of marriage of Yeonju and Kang Cheol, which was such a bigger surprise for her. Jong Suk came to ask about Kang Cheol's decision. He decided to give up revenge and his enormous fortune, because he had his own goal for life. Kang Cheol asked Jong Suk to stop finding for the culprit and not to question for anything as it was way too complicated. The next day, Yeonju and the lawyer finished the legal procedures with the chief prosecutor before she was freed. Do-yoon gave her the wedding ring. He asked her to put it on all the time to avoid the public attention. Coming to Kang Cheol's home, all of the maids lined up and bowed to her return. Yeonju was excited with this change, but she felt shy when she had to share the bedroom with Kang Cheol. She was more surprised when their wedding was on the headlines. Kang Cheol came when she just saw the sexy lingerie in the wardrobe. He said it was her choice of the bold style. She couldn't say anything. Then they had a date in the same way written in a book. Kang Cheol began with tying her hair. Next, he carried her to the bed and read a book together. They just read a book in each other's embrace. When they were about to kiss, Do-yoon just walked straight into their room. He asked to see Kang Cheol on the rooftop. In the elevator, a line of text suddenly appeared in front of Kang Cheol. He received a call from an unknown phone number. Do-yoon gave Kang Cheol the resignation of So-hee. He said her hand became transparent in the last time they met. Kang Cheol got back to the bedroom and admired Yeonju sleeping in sound. Kang Cheol held his gun when the unknown phone number was calling. He wondered why Kang Cheol could return to the alternate universe and mentioned the murder of Kang Cheol's parents. He threatened to harm Yeonju next. When he hung up the phone, Kang Cheol felt really worried. Kang Cheol himself thought he would stop finding for the culprit. In order to protect Yeonju, he had to find out the truth and catch the culprit. Do-yoon told Kang Cheol that he failed to track down the phone number as it didn't exist. Reviewing everything that had happened, he was sure that the culprit did exist. However, he didn't have an identity. The culprit was created to murder Kang Cheol's family, who had no sense of guilt. That was why Kang Cheol couldn't find and stop him, as Yeonju was the next target of the culprit. Kang Cheol was really anxious. In the running luxury limousine, Kang Cheol and Yeonju dressed up as the aristocrats. They went to the party that Kang Cheol prepared for her in the Cinderella style. In the middle of their dance, Yeonju woke up and realized it was just a dream. Kang Cheol kept her in the penthouse to make sure of her safety, to keep her from feeling bored. He wanted to do what couples often do. They happily cooked together. They both cooked happily. Kang Cheol realized that she was no longer immortal in his world. When word to be continue appeared, Yeonju disappeared. She was back to her familiar home, reading the latest chapter. She freaked out when the culprit already knew who she was. At the same time, so he complained to Kang Cheol about her romantic relationship. She got so scared when her body became transparent. On the way to see So-hee, Kang Cheol realized that when a character had nothing to do more with the lead character, he would disappear like So-hee and Hyun Suk. However, the culprit existed thanks to his own consciousness and was sucked down into the real world. He was still out there as he didn't know how to get back to alternate universe. He even called and threatened Yeonju. That scared her out. She woke Subong up and they quickly got out of there. At that time, the culprit came to Yeonju's house. He stopped her car and pointed a gun at her. Aiming at her head, he pulled the trigger. Fortunately, she was pulled into the W's alternate universe, and she was safe. Kang Cheol was driving to find her and she appeared next to him all of a sudden. She got into panic with what just happened. The culprit disappeared without hurting Subong. Black returned to Yeonju's home and realized that Songmu was on the airplane. He moved there and met Songmu in the toilet. In the alternate universe, Yeonju and Kang Cheol were going to So-hee's condo. When they arrived, So-hee was scared because her body was melting away. After a while of encouragement, So-hee stabilized her spirit and her body got back to normal. Kang Cheol and Yeonju took care of So-hee together. Next, Kang Cheol took Yeonju back to his penthouse. He told her what he kept for himself. To stop her from being the female lead who would be in danger, Kang Cheol wanted her to get back to her world and never come to the alternate universe again. Also, he asked her to make everything a dream during the time he was in coma. He gave her a USB of the plot that he prepared in advance. Kang Cheol just wanted to protect her from the murderer. Finally, he hoped she would forget him. After bidding a farewell to her, he jumped off the rooftop. Waking up, he returned to the beginning time when So-hee was still the female lead. At that time, he thought it was just a dream. Yeonju came back to her world. As promised, she kept the plot in the way he wanted. The murderer found Songmu on the plane. He attacked the author and asked for an appearance. As the plot was changed, the murderer disappeared from the real world. However, he took 3 lives before that. Subong and Yeonju's mother found her in a car. She fainted on her last legs. After what happened on the plane, Songmu returned to South Korea and went to see Yeonju and her mother. He was extremely worried about his daughter. Also, he found the USB of the plot written by Kang Cheol. It also conveyed Kang Cheol's message to Songmu. He hoped Songmu would create a happy ending. It was for Yeonju. Songmu slept on it. Waking up in the next morning, Yeonju only thought of Kang Cheol. She felt missing him a lot. The author kept going on the webtoon to please his fans. Kang Cheol was described as a hero who contributed a lot to the society. When Subong went to see Songmu and discuss the next chapter, Songmu wanted to come with a happy ending by giving the murderer an identity, then end him once and for all. Kang Cheol saved all the information that he found about the suspect in the USB. Songmu based on it to create an identity for the suspect. After just a while, Songmu completed to make an identity for the culprit, despite that it created a hole in the plot. Subong was surprised at the sketch. In the alternate universe, Kang Cheol found the culprit. He saw his face through the CCTV. Songmu drew the culprit with his own face. He turned himself the villain, which was the only thing that Kang Cheol could accept. Professor Park was very happy and told Yeonju about the new plot twist. As for him, the previous chapters were cock and bull love story. Yeonju didn't know what to say. Subong let her know that the next 4 chapters would lead to a happy ending. Once the culprit was verified, he was wanted nationwide. The police found the suspect's whereabouts. They took him to the police station. Many related evidences were found at his home, which were his plan and weapon. At the police station, he admitted to murder Kang Cheol's family with the purpose of personal revenge. Getting mad by the murderer's thrust, Kang Cheol gave him a blow. The police officers timely stopped him. Yet, Songmu thought it wasn't a happy ending yet. It should have been another villain to end a villain for good. The councilman was the chosen one, who tried to put Kang Cheol in jail in the beginning. Because he was still bitter about it, he paid someone to end the murderer's life. Before that, the culprit told the police that the councilman ordered him to murder them. Very soon after that, the councilman was under arrest. It was part of the series ending. The final scene was the romantic moment between Kang Cheol and Sohee. Yeonju was very sad because she knew Kang Cheol loved her, and she loved him back. At night when she was sleeping, the alarm of emergency kept ringing. It was a chaotic when Yeonju arrived. The news reported that there was a gun attack at the W studio. Yeonju arrived at the emergency department and everything was a mess. She was extremely surprised when Kang Cheol appeared all of a sudden. However, he had forgotten everything about her. He asked her to save the victims as soon as possible. He talked to her like a stranger. She couldn't know why she was there. Subong's heart was about to jump out of his chest when Songmu's face was deformed. He lost all his facial features. The murderer in the webtoon took his face. An hour before the MC was talking about the murderer gave him a shot in his head. The entire studio freaked out. He shot many people there. The pervert showed himself with Songmu's face. He went there to get rid of Kang Cheol once and for all. After the mass shooting, he got out of there through the magic door. When the police arrived, it was too late. Ahead of the mass shooting, Songmu was trying to write an end to W. He heard the murderer's voice. He was extremely happy to have a face. Also, he figured out that Kang Cheol and Songmu were trying to close the alternate universe. Couldn't accept it. He pulled Songmu into the alternative universe and took his facial feature. Subong was too afraid to faint when he saw Songmu's deformed face. The murderer ordered Songmu to draw everything in the way he wanted. When he had a gun and lots of bullets, the murderer moved to the studio and shoot many people there. He showed himself on TV and challenged Kang Cheol. When Kang Cheol arrived at the studio, the murderer already disappeared. When Yeonju watched the news, she was puzzled when his father wrote a totally different plot. She didn't understand why she was back to the universe. Kang Cheol held a press conference to seek for the murderer and make him take responsibilities for everything. He also demanded to review the case of the councilman who was told to murder Kang Cheol's family. Next morning, Yeonju woke up and she was still in the W's alternate universe. The police didn't find the culprit yet, so they were still in danger. In the following days, Yeonju couldn't find a way to get back to her world. She wandered around the hospital's canteen and room for doctors. Sitting on the sidewalk, she saw Sohee. Knowing Sohee's password to her home, she decided to get there. When she was cooking instant noodles before taking a bath, Kang Cheol went there. He knew someone dangerous just broke into. Kicking the door, he caught a woman who was a doctor he met. Based on the evidences and her behaviors, Kang Cheol thought she was a thief. He threatened to take her to the police station if she didn't tell him the truth. Feeling pity for what she had been through, he cooked instant noodles for her. She got nothing to eat for 3 days. Yeonju was moved when he applied ointment on her wound. She cried hopelessly because she was no longer the female lead. Kang Cheol didn't remember who she was, so that she just wanted to get back to her world. When the police arrived, Kang Cheol didn't let them take her away. He drove her somewhere, as the councilman was related to the murder of Kang Cheol's family 10 years ago. He was at risk of losing his position for wrongly accusing of Kang Cheol. The vice director of the prosecutor department asked him to resign. When he didn't know what to do, the murderer called him and offered to help him handle Kang Cheol. More than that, the murderer even promised to help him become the president of the country. Then the murderer ordered Songmu to create a detail defaming Kang Cheol. Hyun Suk received a recording of Kang Cheol's 10-year-ago fight with his DD. As a result, Kang Cheol became the suspect who murdered his own family. The recording destroyed Hyun Suk's belief in Kang Cheol. Kang Cheol claimed that there was someone who framed him. When they were talking, Hyun Suk was shot out of the blue. A gun suddenly appeared in Kang Cheol's hand. Hyun Suk's wife and a nurse got in and saw Kang Cheol holding the gun. He had no choice but to point the gun at the police for a chance to get away. Kang Cheol stole a car. Yeonju asked him to stop the car as he got a wound. At the drugstore, Yeonju heard that Kang Cheol was wanted nationwide. The councilman was very happy with this. Once Kang Cheol was caught, he could have a career promotion. Yeonju took him to an unpopulated motel and treated his wound. For the moment, they were safe. Yeonju needed to find the truth and change the life of Kang Cheol. She gave him a kiss with a hope that he could recall their memories. A while later, Yeonju was moved to her world. Taking the chance, Yeonju collected some medicine to treat Kang Cheol's wound. Next, she went home to see her dad and Subong. She blamed her father for putting Kang Cheol in danger. But when she saw his face, her heart jumped out of her chest. She went out and called Subong. He told her that Songmu was drawing under someone's order. Subong advised her to run away from danger. Regardless of his advice, she still went back in and checked on the manuscript. Her father turned around and attacked her. The police was searching Kang Cheol's house. They seized a gun as an evidence and lots of documents. Kang Cheol was wanted everywhere around the country. 2 police officers who were searching the hotel where Kang Cheol was, hearing the police's sound, he held a gun to protect himself. In the world, Yeonju was drawing. Yeonju deleted the room where Kang Cheol was in and the CCTV. She also changed the car and license plate. The police left because they found nothing there, grabbing the chance. She drew painkillers for Kang Cheol and a note, "Take care and wait for me." The murderer discovered Yeonju when she was drawing. Through the magic door, he strangled her neck. She turned off the display tablet to save herself. Thanks to this, she cut off the connection between him and Songmu. He fainted away. Subong and Yeonju's co-worker went to Songmu's home. Seeing Yeonju stayed in safe, Subong felt relieved. They tried to find a solution together. They would make it a dream of Kang Cheol. When her co-worker opened the door and got in, Yeonju was pulled into the webtoon again. However, she was standing in the councilman's office. He caught her when she was sneaking out of there. Fortunately, no one chased after her. Asking for the time at a convenience store, she realized that she left there for only 2 hours. It was a time-lapse when she was on the way to see Kang Cheol, asking for the time at the convenience store earlier. It was 1 month later. She ran to the hotel for Kang Cheol and realized that it was her who deleted the room. She didn't know where he was, so she went to the penthouse and asked Do-yoon. He gave her Kang Cheol's go-to place. Do-yoon hoped she would find Kang Cheol there and persuaded him to give himself up. Yeonju arrived at a bus station from a remote suburb. Kang Cheol finally appeared to pick her up. On the way, they talked about that night. He did as she wrote in the paper note and successfully took the bullet out of his body. After that, he drove away from the hotel. He was melting away because he was no longer the male lead. He drove to a flea market to buy new clothes for her. They had ice cream together, then bought many food at a mall. Getting to his place, Kang Cheol wanted to do 10 romantic things with her, which surprised Yeonju a lot. It was because Kang Cheol read W comics and learned about it. Do-yoon gave it to him. Before that, a doctor found the comic book that Yeonju left there on the same day of the mass shooting. After reading the comic book, Kang Cheol decided to wait for Yeonju to come back. He wanted to ask her about the next chapter. Suddenly, the time stopped. A magic door appeared. Without hesitation, Kang Cheol held her hand and moved to the real world. They stepped out of the display tablet and stood in Songmu's office. Kang Cheol wanted to meet the author of the series. He was shocked by the author's deformed face. Yeonju was washed out. Kang Cheol asked her co-worker to take her to the hospital. After that, he went back to his office. He disassembled the display tablet to make sure the murderer couldn't harm Songmu. It was everyone's safety. At that point in time, the magic door was closed. Subong gave Kang Cheol the sketch of the ending. Subong couldn't get why everything happened was so different. After a while of thinking and studying the drafts, Kang Cheol decided to restore the display tablet. As soon as it was installed, the murderer got back his sense. He knew Kang Cheol was next to the display tablet. Kang Cheol was threatened by the murderer when he was about to eliminate the murder. As Kang Cheol was no longer the male lead, he would disappear soon, and the alternate universe would belong to the murderer. Next morning, Kang Cheol asked her out for a date. He bought a new phone with Subong's identity. Actually, he borrowed Subong 1 billion won to live in her world. Kang Cheol took Yeonju to a secret place. He wanted to kiss her to find back the feeling. What a cunning man. he also let her know that he was disappearing. It was going on for a month. He knew why their plan was broken. The murderer found Songmu when he was going to take Kang Cheol's life on the rooftop. He threatened Songmu so that the author promised to make him the male lead. As Songmu didn't keep his words, the murderer decided to hurt him. That was why they couldn't make it Kang Cheol's dream. Kang Cheol wanted her to draw the webtoon following his drafts. The culprit would be caught. Kang Cheol and Yeonju would be happy ever after. It was the best way to make the plot cohesive and reasonable. Following the traces, Kang Cheol went to the condo where the culprit was. Analyzing the variables, Kang Cheol realized that he could make his wish in the alternate universe come true. Thus, he used his power to turn his surroundings into the alternate universe. He went into the condo and fought the murderer. Of course, the male lead like Kang Cheol always won. Once he overpowered the murderer, he called the police to catch him. Meanwhile, Yeonju was drawing following the drafts that Kang Cheol gave her. She drew a car for Kang Cheol to left the scene. The police arrived and arrested the murderer. Next, Yeonju drew a fake body of Kang Cheol and put it in a suburb house. Kang Cheol told Do-yoon about the body. He convinced the police that Kang Cheol was murdered by the suspect. Examining the crime scene and performed an autopsy, Kang Cheol was reported to be murdered. The police also arrested the culprit. Before leaving, Kang Cheol bid a farewell to Yeonju. She was afraid that he wouldn't get back. Actually, he found it his own way. Kang Cheol returned to the comic world. She drew their promise ring. After that, he went to the condo of the culprit. He realized that whenever the mission was accomplished, Kang Cheol could get back to the real world. After moving, he contacted Yeonju. She felt blissful and they went out for a date. In the comic world, the murderer couldn't accept that Kang Cheol was gone. He wanted to confirm this, and his eyes scared the police. Kang Cheol was confirmed to be gone. The murderer asked to see the councilman. He asked the police not to touch him for safe. The police officer didn't get him. The officer's boss heard this, and he told the councilman when they had dinner together. The councilman gave a lot of thought to this matter. On the way home, he ordered someone to get rid of the murderer. That was also the next chapter of W. Reading the new chapter, Yeonju called Subong to ask about her father. There was still no progress. As soon as she got off work, Kang Cheol asked her to grab a coffee together. She dressed up immediately. The story was also developing very quickly. Songmu was getting back his face. Kang Cheol successfully put the councilman in jail as the initial plot. He was accused of Kang Cheol's fake death. Kang Cheol restored the male lead's reputation. It was a happy ending when he could stay with Yeonju. Songmu accepted to let them be together. Soon, they would get married and released their own products. Back in real life, Yeonju went to a cafe shop. Kang Cheol told her about his plan. He said her father would get back at night. At that time, Professor Park came and told her that he became an anti-fan of W. It was because the ending didn't go the way he wanted. Hearing that Park didn't like Kang Cheol, he asked for Park's opinion about the two Yeonju. He said both of them were insane. Yeonju asked Park to leave, yet, he felt similar with the man she was with. Having a closer look, he said her man looked like Kang Cheol. He was so shocked when the guy also named Kang Cheol. Three of them burst out laughing. Hard to believe, but it was true. On the way leaving there, Kang Cheol remembered the images in his world and saw Sohee. When he stopped the car, she disappeared. He called Yeonju to make sure this wasn't the comic world. Yeonju didn't know how Sohee was there. She didn't find her father at home. He appeared before she was going to find him. Kang Cheol went to see Do-yoon to do some final papers. Do-yoon told him that Sohee saw Kang Cheol passing by earlier. She claimed that she saw Kang Cheol when the sky suddenly turned bright. A moment later, the night fell and Kang Cheol disappeared. Hearing that, Kang Cheol also thought of the third theory. If he thought of anyone in the comic world, he or she would be pulled into the real world. If this was true, Kang Cheol might have brought danger there without knowing it. Songmu asked Yeonju how he could get back there. She said Kang Cheol draw his return. Knowing that Kang Cheol wasn't there, he admitted to be the murderer. He wanted to eliminate both of them. Kang Cheol wasn't there, so he would take her life first. At that moment, Do-yoon got a call. The police said the murderer disappeared. When he could get out of the police station, he waited in a police car and ended a police's life. He turned on the display tablet and woke Songmu up, then freed him. The murderer disguised himself as Songmu and fooled Yeonju. He couldn't accept such an ending, which wasn't what he wanted. Do-yoon realized something when Kang Cheol disappeared in front of him. Thanks to the help of Songmu, the murderer easily got a car and a phone to contact the councilman. He threatened to take the councilman's life if he didn't get a place to hide. They were still on the same side as Kang Cheol was still alive. Arriving at Yeonju's home, Kang Cheol saw Songmu destroying the display tablet. Kang Cheol told Subong, "Do not get in, it's dangerous." Yeonju was kidnapped. Right after that, Kang Cheol moved to see the councilman. He was shocked when Kang Cheol was still alive like the murderer said. Kang Cheol kept blowing him to make him tell the murderer's whereabouts. The councilman remembered everything happened. He felt missing something. Yeonju was still safe, yet, the murderer was too impatient. When he was about to shoot her, a group of people stopped him under the order of the councilman. Everything was going worse when Kang Cheol tried to shift between two worlds. Taking the chance, Yeonju ran away and she was shot. Unable to hold back anymore, Kang Cheol moved himself to the murderer's place. They drove their cars against each other. Being alive after the crash, they shot each other. The murderer lost his life and Yeonju disappeared. Kang Cheol got in and asked about the girl. She was alive and taken to the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, the doctors saved Yeonju's life. The councilman went to the scene. He saw the note of address that he gave Kang Cheol earlier and the body of the murderer. He checked for something in the murderer's phone, and he found his wounded hireling. He learned that the woman disappeared in a vague way. Song-moo returned. He was stunned when his display tablet was smashed, and he felt really sorry for hurting her daughter in the comic world. After that, Song-moo and Subong went to the scene. They were told that the girl was taken away. Song-moo couldn't stand on his feet when he heard she was in a bad state. The doctor said Yeonju might not get recovered. Kang Cheol heard the same thing when he was melting away, so that he took Yeonju to the alternate universe to do something. The nurse told Song-moo about that. Realizing that Kang Cheol took her away, Song-moo drowned his sorrow in drink. Kang Cheol went there and told Song-moo that there was no hope in the real world, yet, it was still a hope in the alternate world. However, it wasn't much better. Yeonju opened her eyes once for a few seconds. After a week, Yeonju was gone. Song-moo collapsed. Song-moo was taken to the hospital. Professor Park asked the author why Yeonju lost her life. Song-moo wanted to end his own life. Kang Cheol stopped him timely. He advised Song-moo that there was still something they had to do. Stop blaming yourself. It's not your fault. Song-moo was the only one who could save her. If he took his own life, there would be no chance left for her. Because Yeonju was a character in the webtoon, Song-moo could save her in the same way as he brought Kang Cheol back to life. It wasn't the end yet, so they couldn't give up. Song-moo finally pulled himself together. When the murderer prepared this plan, he created a new display tablet and kept it in the trunk after destroying the old one. The councilman was keeping it so Kang Cheol would take it back. The councilman set up a trap to put Kang Cheol under an anesthetic when he came. Kang Cheol was caught because the councilman knew to use the display tablet. He wanted to know what was really going on, and what was that? Kang Cheol was beaten up and he talked something about the hospital. Kang Cheol let him about the alternate universe. When he went to the hospital, Kang Cheol informed Subong that the tablet was coming. Subong didn't get it. He asked Song-moo and they seemed to realize something. Kang Cheol moved himself to the real world. He also shifted the councilman to the place of Song-moo. Together, they knocked the councilman senseless. Duyun was amazed when Yeonju opened her eyes. She also called Subong, which made him very happy. Some people saw Kang Cheol before he got back to his own world. By chance, the councilman encountered him on his way back. It was out of control and hard to distinguish between two worlds. Yeonju heard that it was a year later, so he said Kang Cheol was put in jail due to many accusations. Yeonju went to the court to see the man she loved. They were happy to see each other again. Kang Cheol said he couldn't shift between two worlds anymore. It perhaps the ending. At a critical time, the handcuff opened itself. A gun appeared in his hand. He realized something and fled away. The councilman was so worried when Yeonju woke up and Kang Cheol escaped. Kang Cheol picked Yeonju up at a cafe shop. He said everything was changed and they had to expose everything. Song-moo helped Kang Cheol escape. He might be up to something. Somehow, he was pulled into the alternate universe a year ago. However, the murderer's mind controlled him. He wasn't in his right mind, so he tied himself up to make sure he wouldn't harm anyone during sleep. Yeonju was sad when her father was sick yet happy when he was still alive. Kang Cheol did not let her know what Song-moo did when he lost control, when he was newly brought there. He took a nurse's life to get out of there. He couldn't turn back. If he stopped committing crimes, he would be melted away. If not, he couldn't live as a normal person as he had murdered someone. At the same time, the councilman began to act. He tortured Duyun to force Kang Cheol show himself with the display tablet. Kang Cheol realized that the evil returned. The murderer ordered Song-moo to take Yeonju's life. Yeonju was frightened, yet, she didn't blame her father. Her father and the man she loved were fading away, because her father didn't commit a crime, and Kang Cheol didn't do a good deed when he decided not to save Duyun, couldn't hide it from her anymore. Kang Cheol said Song-moo murdered someone. The police would come there soon. One of them gotta disappear, so the other could continue his life. When the police arrived, Yeonju covered her house in bricks, taking the chance. Kang Cheol asked her to choose an ending. Kang Cheol was willing to sacrifice himself, because he didn't exist in her world. Yeonju didn't want that. She would give them best ending. After they could escape with Songmu, Kang Cheol went to save Do-yoon. When Kang Cheol met the councilman, he tortured Do-yoon and heard everything. The councilman didn't shoot Kang Cheol in his head so that he could grab a chance to steal the gun, and showed everyone who was the male lead. Yeonju drew a car to pick Kang Cheol up. However, he gave her his last words. When she arrived, Kang Cheol was dying. Yeonju was brought back to the real world. Everything related to the alternate universe disappeared and Subong realized something. He picked up Yeonju, whose heart was broken. Besides, Subong found Songmu nowhere. He didn't know what happened to him. Yeonju continued her life without the two men who were so important to her. Most of the readers found something wrong with the ending, throwing back in time. When the councilman failed to catch Kang Cheol, Do-yoon released Songmu, who decided to sacrifice his life. Songmu called the councilman and controlled him. He made the councilman took his own life and left a suicide note about all of his crimes. Songmu went to see his daughter for the last time before disappearing to the air. Do-yoon came in time to save Kang Cheol's life. When he got recovered, he was put in jail. Do-yoon conveyed Songmu's message to him. He wrote down his feeling before making a decision. They would swap their places. Songmu became a comic character and Kang Cheol continued his life as a human being. Life is really interesting and he hoped that her daughter would be happy with Kang Cheol. Songmu asked Kang Cheol not to tell Yeonju that he was gone. After 2 years in prison, Kang Cheol moved himself to the real world and did what Songmu asked. Yeonju was waiting in the rain where Kang Cheol collapsed. Yeonju woke up in his embrace in the hospital. Her mother doubted him at first, yet, when he gave her his card visit, she let him be with Yeonju. She was moved when he gave her a photo of her father. In the end, their story bore fruits. They lived to happily together ever after. The end. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I'll give you more interesting recaps. Goodbye and see you next time.